Goodness. Hold on. Oh, great. That's gonna be an issue. Let's go ahead and mute that. That's good now. Now should be able to see the chat here then. Good. And okay, 0 views. Hey, can't complain. It's something at least. Say welcome to everybody. Welcome. Welcome. Righty. What's that? Oh, forgot the main one. The YouTubes. Oh, oh no. No, maybe, yeah. I could just make it big. That, nah, that's too big. That's what she said. Woohoo! Right. Hmm. Ooh. All right. "5 minutes of nonsense done. Time to take off the headphones." Hmm. And let's get this show started. Hey there, Outlaw. Welcome. Oh, I see that you like vampire stories. That's quite a good one that you picked up, and a classic. Tell you what, me and my friend are gonna be narrating it to you. The Price of Favor. The Price of a Favor. Written by NKVD. Open up. Narrated by Yamakutabi and Sarah Jane Eve. The man walked on. The man walked alone down the wet cobblestone streets that lined the city. There was a certain dampness in the air, and the city could feel electric at this time of night. The city itself, being rather plain, had often gone through great building sprees in order to compete with nearby cities for tourists. But the city leadership made sure not to tell the tourists, however, was that the city lay near a great, stagnant body of water, giving it a rather unpleasant aroma, not to mention the bountiful number of mosquitoes. Precisely because of those building sprees, the city had taken on a haphazard appearance. It had no sense of cohesion, save for the poorer districts that were unified only in being run down and containing the city's dregs. The man was wandering into the seedier parts of the city. Despite the fine clothes he found himself in nowadays, he found himself at home in the poorer districts. Perhaps they reminded him of a home he had nearly forgotten, or perhaps they simply knew not to stare at strangers. Whatever the case, he found himself here again and again. He buttoned he buttoned his dark brown overcoat as he walked and pulled down the rim of his matching bowler hat, doing his best to hide his eyes and perpetually boyish face. No matter where he went in the world, from the streets of Shanghai to the very streets he walked down now, his eyes always set him apart. He could never seem to fully hide how they glow a faintly tangerine tint, and yet he always tried. He loved to strut past the working girls. Their wares held no interest for him now, of course. but it was always good to make friends. Friends come in handy. Say when one needed an alibi, or perhaps to say, no, Mr. Barrymore's much too nice to have anything to do with that. Nah, no strumpet could hold his interest now. He had only one need now, one desire, that he pressed down his neck, that made his hair stand on end. The one desire that had him prowling the streets here in the dark rain. It was the hunger. The all-encompassing hunger was his only interest, his only love and desire. He knew his hungers would have him to. He knew his hunger would have to wait for now. A few too many false starts this past few nights had him feeling a spook. He would have to eat eventually, of course, but he simply couldn't risk leaving himself exposed. That would bring questions. Once he knew, he held no answers to. I'll never find anyone worthwhile in this damp rain, he taught himself. Better go see if I can find a familiar face. Walking onto Cranton Street, he could see Mary there, under the faint street light, standing on her favorite corner, her plain clothes seemingly out of place for her line of work. She was a pleasant woman, her personality not showing any of the wear and tear she wore so harshly on her face. Hello, Mary, he said as he walked casually over. She said, smiling, as she pulled her dark curls into a bun. You could see the lines on her face, and for a woman of 35, she appeared much older. He sometimes wondered whether it had been the kids or their lifetime. He sometimes wondered whether it had been the kids or their lifestyle that had been the culprit. Afraid not, he said in his best apologetic tone. We'll fancy a chat if you're willing, of course, she said, doing her best to light up a cigarette in the cold wetness. Don't get me wrong. I love to Oh, that's not me. I always messed up that line. And I'll be happy to oblige you. One night only, of course, he said to her, offering his lighter. I can make a habit of paying for conversation. After all, what would people say? Ah, Ashley. Lovely girl. Boring, but lovely, he said, friendly smile on display. Mary said, fair enough, he said. She began to walk in a stride fast enough to surprise him. After all these years, it still amazed him just how fast a woman could be in heels when they needed to run. Oh, morning, dreadful anecdotes. Welcome, and thank you for stopping by. Now back to the story. Oh, yeah, everything's doing well. Much better nowadays. Thank you for asking, and I hope that you're doing well as well. They eventually arrived at the place she had spoken of. It was somehow worse than he had thought. The cracked red. Hell, back from the top on that one. They eventually arrived at the place she had spoken of. It was somehow worse than he had thought. The cracked red brick exterior and poor lighting giving the place an altogether deteriorated and dingy look. Oh, cool, cool. I'm glad that you're stopping by even while editing. It's gonna be a challenge if you got the volume up, just to let you know. But let me go ahead back to the story. Mary told him flatly. He opened the door. It felt as if it may fall off the hinges if anyone was so inclined as to give it a hard pull. He walked over to the desk clerk. $20. Oh, gotta change that voice a little bit. Sounds way too similar to the MC. 20 bucks. The man stated blankly. Mr. Barrymore looked at the calendar behind the clerk. It read August 2nd, 1959. The year had seemingly passed by in the blink of an eye, and at his age, they had a bad habit of bleeding together. He placed two neat crisp $10 bills on the counter, the clerk reaching forward to grasp them greedily. It occurred to him that in another century, people might have run in horror from the clerk and his poxy looking hands. He walked towards Mary, sparing one last look of disgust for the desk clerk. He walked towards Mary, sparing one last look of disgust for the desk clerk. They walked together up the creaking stairs and through a dimly lit hallway, the cracking white paint on the walls having likely been there, neglected since the 20s. What good times, though. The cracked wet paints on the wall having likely been there, neglected since the 20s. What good times those have been, he thought to himself. Mary opened the door to a surprisingly cozy room. Its foundations were as neglected as the rest of the place, but she had tried her best to give it a place, though. Mary opened the door to a surprisingly cozy room. Its foundations were as neglected as the rest of the place, but she had tried her best to give the place a woman's touch. It smelled of lavender and of spring, and the bed sheets were a lovely shade of grey. Her room facing nothing but a brick wall, she had made the best of it with matching curtains. Mary said politely. Not likely to change my mind, dear, said Mr. Barrymore. I have a thing about being touched. Dreadful, really. It certainly limits my prospects. Just a striptease. Just a striptease. Just a striptease. He interrupted, sitting down on the bed. In truth, he had been interested to know whether those male parts of his still worked. It had turned out that it did. I thought it was not her shapely body that had done it. He had seen as she danced how the veins in her neck had fluttered and throbbed. How excited he had felt as that. How excited he had felt at that sight. How alive. He had watched Miss Ashley dance for some time before he came close to him. Oh, the scent she'd thrown into his nose. How he hungered for her. Yet, he remembered how she had suddenly recoiled from him when he realized that she had touched him. She had noticed, of course. Who wouldn't? He could sometimes hide his eyes. He could hide his hungry gaze, and even his true attitude and beliefs, but not his touch. How cold he felt, how stiff. He, of course, apologized profusely, talking much about his skin condition and the terrible trouble it had given him with women. She understood. He had made her understand how an attractive man like him had come to seek her company, why he dressed always in long clothes, why he wasn't married. He had given her just enough to rationalize everything in her mind. She had even apologized to him. He knew how naive people could be. Mary's voice broke his silent contemplation. Sorry, my dear. I lost myself in wondering at my lot in life and where it leads me. I'll take the bed all the same. He smiled as earnestly as he knew how. She stammered. Now, Mary, I like to think we've spoken enough to be comfortable around one another. I know I've never purchased your services before, but you know my real name. I've been out of I've been out on the town with your friends, certainly in your night of from the top. I don't want to cut this off because it's one full sentence, and cutting them off can be an issue, especially when you're editing. Now, Mary, I like to think we've spoken enough to be comfortable around one another. I know I've never purchased your services before, but you know my real name. I've been out on the town with your friends. Certainly, in your line of work, that counts for something. She said, looking at her feet. Please, call me Winston. You needn't be so formal with me. And there's nothing in particular I wish to discuss. Simply to pick your mind for an hour. See, it's not often I get to have a real discussion with those around me. I have my business partners, of course, but friendship has been hard to come by. And love, even more than that. My affliction has left me rather isolated, said Winston, doing his best to sound sorrowful. Don't you have any protectors? Winston asked her. Someone to watch over you? Mary told him, tears threatening to fall. What about your family, Mary? She trailed off. So, your parents miss you? That sounds like an advantage over some of the other girls you work with. From the little I know about many of them, they have no one, just one another. Winston knew things like that worked in his favor. An isolated group with little outside contact could be easy picking, but he had also learned that they could be turned to his advantage, alive and unharmed. Mary told him. What do you say I help you, Mary? Money's no issue. And besides, I like doing what I can for others. Winston sat up on the bed. I pay I'll pay this bill's months. This bill's months. Well, Winston sat up on the bed. I'll pay this month's bills, and then I'll set up contact with your father. You could meet him at my office. I pay this month's bills, and then I'll set up contact with your father. You can meet him at my office. I say you've been working as my secretary. He doesn't have to know a thing. Mary said, trying to not let her excitement show. Oh, it's a simple matter, really. All you have to do is bring a person to meet me. That's all. You'll bring them and then leave. Mary asked him. Oh, but it will be, my dear. In a few days' time, after I've paid your debts, I call on you. I will tell you the who and the where. You will bring them to me. After that, I'll give you enough money to make it downtown. I'll have a hotel set up for you and your children. I'll let you use my office telephone to call your father and tell him where to meet you. I'll even make a nameplate for the desk so that everything will look just perfect. As for the why, my dear, it's trivial, really. I like to have a conversation with this person, much like you and I are doing now. That's all there is to it, he said with a genial smile. Mary said skeptically, never look a gift horse in the mouth, dear. Never look a gift horse in the mouth, dear. That's what's being offered, and thank me if you wish, but even that is not necessary. Please, dear, call me Winston. Without thinking, Mary ran over and hugged Winston. As her arms wrapped around him, he could smell the salt in her tears. He could see the blood pump in her neck. Tum tum, dum-dum. He pulled back slowly from her. He hoped she had not noticed the look on his face. Mary told him she hadn't seemed to notice the feel of his skin, nor had she paid any mind to how his chest never rose and fell. In that instance, she had only noticed her own happiness overwhelm. In that, oh, Mary told him she hadn't seemed to notice the feel of his skin, nor had she paid any mind to how his chest never rose and fell. In that instance, she had only noticed her own happiness overwhelming her. The next few days seemed a blur. Winston was prepared for what came next. He had laid out every last detail as meticulously as he could. He had instructed Mary to not tell anyone about his kindness, lest every girl come around with a sob story and their hands out. She had understood, but still, he had ensured she had followed his word. Knock, knock, knock. Mary answered the door wearing a bright summer dress. In his day, a simple peasant like her would never have such finery. But this was the age of the machine, and those ideas were long dead. Hello again, Mary, he said with a smile. Now or never. He saw the nervous look that lay on her face, and so he reached out his hand for her to take, breaking his own rule about touch. This will set her a little more at ease. Mary swallowed. Against her better judgment, she went. He escorted her down to his waiting black Imperial. It was brand new and meant to impress. He opened the door for her. Wash your head, my dear. She sat and waited for Winston to enter the car. He walked around and got in, and for the first time, she noticed his eyes. Frightened, she said nothing. Now that I've paid your debts, it's time for you to fulfill your end of the bargain. Oh, excuse me. Now that I paid your debts, it's time for you to fulfill. Now that I pay your debts, it's time for you to fulfill your end of the bargain. You'll find Thomas, and you'll bring him. Oh. Now that I pay your debts, it's time for you to fulfill your end of the bargain. You'll find Thomas, and you'll bring him to this address. He laid an address in her lap, hastily scrawled on a piece of paper. I don't care how you get him there. It's up to you. Once he enters the door, then, my dear, we are even. I will hand you enough cash to get to my hotel, and you will leave. Ask no questions, and do not come back. I must stress this last point. I'll see you tomorrow night. Mary asked incredulously. Yes, dear. No more questions. Bring him to me, and your troubles will be at an end. This, I swear. He held his hands over his still heart. Mary got out and looked back once more at Winston. He knew she would do it. How could she not? Had he not shown her every kindness? Had he not been a perfect gentleman? She would do it. He had no doubts. The girl had been offered too much to stop now. He arrived at the house. He didn't know who owned the place, only that they had been home for some time and weren't likely to be any time soon. It had a marvelous exterior. Built in the colonial revival style and painted white. Someone had clearly put a lot of love into this home, and for all the majesty of the exterior, the interior was much better. The house had all the luxuries one would expect of a modern home: television, radio, indoor plumbing, the works. None of it, none of it mattered to Winston in the slightest. Yet, he had chosen this home for those very reasons. He knew how disarming wealth could be. He sat in the artificial light, waiting as the hours passed. He began to doubt himself for the first time in this adventure, wondering if time had idled his senses. Had he gone soft? Had he... Ding dong. Ding dong. He stepped to the entrance and opened the door, mustering the friendly demeanor he had seen in the popular films. He stepped to the entrance and opened the door, mustering the friendly demeanor he had seen in the popular films. Hello, Mary. And you must be Thomas. Please step inside. He ushered the two of them inside the home. He had made sure the house was well lit, and he had gone through the trouble to put out some wine and hors d'oeuvres. After all, the players can play their part if the stage isn't set. What's this about? Thomas asked gruffly. Winston frowned at the horrible demeanor he displayed in return. His day, it may have been enough to have a man socially humiliated. Business pro- business propose business proposition, Winston said, putting back on the mask of civility. I've heard you run a tight ship. I need a man like you, and as you can see, money is no issue. Why didn't you have this bitch just tell me that? Thomas snarled. Gotta save her a lot of trouble. Not to mention a black eye. Water under the bridge, Winston said, his mind already racing at the thought of what comes next. She'll live. A moment if you would. But please, help yourself to the wine. We'll have much to discuss. Thomas went over to the table and sat down, facing away from the door. Winston turned and ushered Mary to the side. Sorry about the troubles, dear. Hadn't expected the brute would get violent as so slight. Sorry about the troubles, dear. Hadn't expected the brute would get so violent as so slight a provocation. she said uncomfortably. Uh, 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 uh. Winston said, disappointed. Remember, no questions. His face showing no emotion. He placed $300 in her hand. Go ahead to my hotel, Mary. Wait for me there. Do not come back here, or the deal is off. For the first time, she saw the anger in his eyes. He had given her more money than she had seen in years, and she hadn't even acknowledged it. You will leave now, and you will not return. You will do as you're told. And that is the end of it, Winston said. Despite his eyes, Mary noticed that his voice barely wavered. Well, I gotta redo that one. Went a little show emotion on the voice. I shouldn't have to. You will leave now, and you will not return. You will do as you're told, and that is the end of it, Winston said. Despite his eyes, Mary noticed that his voice barely wavered. You don't need to care about him. He just hit you, Mary. Forget it and go. She cried out quietly. She had begun to panic. She needed to know what she might be responsible for. It weighed on her conscience. She needed to know. Winston smiled over at Thomas, who had begun to look at them. Just throw the bitch out and hurry up. I don't got all night, Thomas yelled across the room. Leave now, Winston whispered to her in a hush. Oh, whispered hush. See if I can pull the voice on that one. Leave now, Winston whispered to her in a hushed growl, grabbing her arm in his vice-like grip. Mary cried out. As she walked away, her gut feeling continued to ring out. She couldn't let this go. Winston kept an eye on Mary until she was well out of sight. He chuckled to himself. Finally, he could begin. Sorry for the trouble, Thomas. You of all people know how women can be. Winston made his way over to the table, carefully ensuring Winston made his way over to the table. Winston made his way over to the table, carefully ensuring he remained behind Thomas at all times. It's all right. I had to teach that bitch a lesson, Earl. Thomas wasn't able to finish the sentence before Winston had set up upon him. The last thing he saw was his own blood spraying all over the wooden table, spreading out in so many little pools. Winston liked to use a knife on his food. Biting someone on the neck was risky. It left evidence that was out of the ordinary. But a knife could have been anyone, for any reason. Besides, the blood tasted the same from a fountain as it did from the tap. Hey, good morning, Shashel. Welcome. I'm almost done narrating this story, but I'm glad that you made it here. Now, back to the story. He drank to his heart's content. As always, He stabbed Thomas a few more times in the heart just to be sure. Killed two birds with one stone. Not only was it less risky, but had the upside of looking very personal, despite being anything but. The cleanup was the worst part of the meal. Winston would need to bathe and then get dressed. He hated bathing outside his own home. It always left him feeling rather vulnerable and quite literally naked. He began his way to the stairs. He heard it. He began making his way to the stairs. Then he heard it. Just a small sound. One that he couldn't afford to ignore. Winston moved silently around into the kitchen that looked into the dining room. He saw Mary there, in the bright kitchen lights, a look of horror on her face. She was trying and failing rather miserably to muffle her cries. Mary, 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 I told you not to come back. She just looked at him, his look so visage, seemingly more than she could bear. Was all she could seem to stammer out. I was hungry, and no one will miss him. Best meals are the ones that don't cause any upset later on. He smiled at her as she finally seen him as he truly was. The horrible thing that lurked below the surface. He stood perfectly still, eyes shining brightly. He looked at her in a way a lion might look at a gazelle on the savannah. You play your part well, Mary. Well, until now. All you had to do was obey. I would have kept my word. Now, though. Now. He trailed off. She cried. I'm rather full just now. Don't think I'll be eating you. That's what makes this a little pathetic, Mary. At least if I ate from you, your death will mean something. Now, it's meaningless. You'll be forgotten, even by me. Once your kids die, no one will ever know you existed. It's a little sad, Mary, he said, mucking at drying a tear. She shrieked. I don't know. I've only ever met one other like me, and he didn't stick around to explain what he's done. Perhaps we're just very rare. A priest told me once that I am the devil, but I think that's unlikely. He stood unblinking. His face told a story. This was fun. Come now, Mary. Really? This song and dance is so old. Every mother says the same thing. He leaped at her, and at once the knife plunged into her heart. She hadn't even had the chance to react. She won without much struggle. He laid her on the floor, lives. He laid her on the floor, knife still in her chest. Now that you're here, may as well have a little fun with you. He laughed to himself. It was one of his little joys in life, playing with his food. He loved to arrange them in all sorts of unusual ways. He dragged Mary into the room with Thomas, and in one fell swoop took Thomas' head clean off. He sat them in the dining chairs at opposite ends of the table and placed Thomas' heads on the silver serving tray at the center of the table. He stepped back and admired his handiwork. He wondered to himself how long it'd take the police to figure out what had happened, how confused they'd be by his grisly display. He stepped away and went to shower. He stepped away and went to shower. He washed himself thoroughly, placing his bloody clothes. He washed himself thoroughly, placing his bloody clothes into a paper bag. He changed into the wonderfully simple brown wool suit that he loved so much. Out of date, though it had been for nearly half a century, he still loved it dearly. As he walked downstairs, he spared one last look at the bodies that lay on the floor. What a waste, he thought. He wondered if people felt the same when throwing out a nice steak that had gone bad. A real pity about Mary. He took his car and parked it at the hotel. Tomorrow evening, after the sun went down, he will take a bus to the next city. It'd only take a few hours to get there, and it was time to start again. He wondered who he will be this time. Winston Barrymore. Having outlived his usefulness, he strained to remember his real names. He strained to remember his real name. It had been so many names ago that he could no longer be sure of which was the original. In the end, it didn't matter much at all. He thought again about the police. They will be sure to be shocked by his savagery and will certainly be looking in every nook and cranny for the one responsible. He will be long gone by then. It had been a bit of fun, but fun never lasts. He had to turn the page. Something new awaited. Something new always waited. For an eternity. And that's today's story, Outlaw. I hope that you enjoyed it. This was a classic story that I'd done before, like years ago. This story itself is 4 years old. That should tell you how long I've been doing this thing, this gig, this song and dance. But still haven't gotten anywhere. That's what I get for letting depression get the best of me and not taking a break. Don't let burnout and depression get the best of you. Try your best to push yourself through it. Once you get over it, you'll feel amazing. Trust me. I just got over mine not long ago, like about a couple days ago, and I feel like a whole new person. And that's what matters. You just push forward and keep going. But on to say my thoughts about this story. This story, like I mentioned, is a classic. And I picked it due to the fact that it's a vampire story based on the 1900s, not 87, but the 1900s, way back. And he's an ancient vampire, playing it off cool, but still a savage at the end. And if she would have just listened, if Mary would have just listened, she would have been fine. Hell, even the person that lent me her voice for the collab, she got She told me herself. She got pissed off and angry, saying, "Girl, I would have taken the money and just gone." And she got angry at her, the character that she was voicing, at the fact that she didn't listen. It's it's hilarious, and at some point, it might give you the impression that, well, this might be an NC-17 story if he's gonna have fun, just for it to be thrown on her back on your face like, hey, this is a horror movie. We don't do that stuff here. We don't do that stuff here. We are horror, and that's what's gonna keep on going. Yeah, and the sad part about it is the story, even though I find it good, it only has 6 votes from 4 years ago and 2 comments. And I don't think that many people have done it. I've done it all. The first time that I've done it and tried to remake it was years ago. Years ago, when I had no idea how to do EQ and how to tame down the sound. That was dreadful. If you hear it back then, it was nothing but dreadful. And me trying to do a female voice, oh, no, didn't work. And like I said, and that's the story. And these are my thoughts for the story. But let me go ahead and end this. And remember, Outlaw, like always, I will see y'all on the wasteland. And that's the official end of the story. Let's see, about 51 minutes long, minus 5 minutes, so that's about 49 minutes minus editing. 40, 40 minutes or 40 minutes or so. Yeah, the story's gonna be about 40 minutes or so. I'll stop that. Rename. Don't want to add too much. If I add too much, that's going to be a pain for editing. So that's 10, 14, 24. Price of the price of favor by. Oh, go back here, get the author's name. I'll get back to you in a second. NKVD underscore open Sarah Jane Eve and Emma. All right, save, save all. Okay. Glad to be. Okay, let me catch up with the chat over here. Glad to be here. That's great advice. Maybe if you read other genres too. But I like the parts I just heard. Oh, other genres? You could go back on this channel. I've done other genres. Fantasy, as a matter of fact. One of them is the it's about dragons waking up. And that one is straight up fantasy, no, not horror at all. There's also Green Inferno, which is fantasy as well. And Goblin Study is also fantasy as well. And also some this other story, what was it called? crows. Something about a crow, if I recall. I did that years ago. Although I like them, that's the thing about this the YouTube over here. You might like something, you might be passionate about a story, how you edited, how you how the narration comes out, or the music comes out, or the story itself, thinking that it's a banger. It's a banger for you, but it's not a banger for the audience. And they are the ones that decide whether to watch your stuff or no. Oh, hello, Queen. I'm glad you stopped by. Yeah, the goblin one was. Bless you. Salud. Ah, that was the little one just sneezing. The dragons one was pretty good. The thing about the dragons one is that it's not. There's a dragon, but it's not one of those. As far as I got, it's not a dragon. It's not one of those dragons that talk. It's like a baby dragon. I was voicing pretty much everybody there myself, which was the main character that everybody think that is a mad hobo, even isolated from society himself. Ends up being that he's not a mad hobo, he's a grand wizard that knows magic. And he's been keeping guard about dragons all this time and warning people like, hey, dragons are coming. You should be getting ready. And things are not gonna be good. As for the goblin one, that one I was on that one I did a voice then. It was fun. And the author himself gave me full permission and his blessing to use the goblin as the mascot for the channel if I wanted to, and whatever with whatever I wanted with it. Yeah, it's like I mentioned, it's an old story. It's an old series too. Multiple chapters. I think there was four, maybe five. Yeah, that's when I was start. When I did that dragon story, I was starting to get extra creative on it, using news broadcast sound that I could. And my editing still sucks. Now it's gotten better, but my editing back then still sucked. The one that I really enjoy was the A Goblin Study and also Green Inferno. Is as you could hear on that one, it was you're gonna hear it on Green Inferno. You're gonna hear the goblin from A Goblin Study when you least expect it, and that's gonna leave you like, oh my god, he did what? Yeah, never underestimate a goblin. They're savages in their own way. Yeah, it's a good idea. And there's also this other story that I gotta narrate, but a part of me keeps telling me if you narrate it, it could easily be taken out of context because that story gets dark. Oh boy, it's not a creepy pasta, but it gets really dark with mm, themes you see in movies, but it just makes me icky. Makes me icky to post them over here on the channel. Because it involves not one bad thing, it involves two bad things. Really bad things. I could talk about a vampire chopping off a pimp's head and sucking off his blood from the neck and doing away with Mary, just fine and dandy, because that itself is horror, sci-fi. The other stuff is not. It's too close to being real. Yeah, I try to get not too scary and gory. Oh, you could get scary and gory, but if you're gonna do that, I suggest you not to post that story on No Sleep. Because if you do that, that story's not gonna make it through. They're gonna read it, they're gonna see that it's too gory, and go like, nope, it's gonna get taken down. That's something that's been happening with No Sleep. Frustrating for some authors. Just giving you a heads up. I think that you could put it on the you could put you could post it on the Creepy Pasta channel, or like I mentioned, if you want to just post it on my Reddit page, and when I get to it, I'll narrate it for the channel. Just be sure to follow the grammar, like I mentioned, have proper grammar for it, and when I get to it, narrate it, and boom, get it done. Oh, if you're there, Queen, I appreciate you stopping by. It's nice of you. Ah, my pleasure. Oh, let's see. It's been an hour and 8 minutes of just streaming. And I guess I should stop. It's way too long, and pretty soon, yeah, yeah, I'll try to have a great morning. Besides, it's just Monday, 4 in the morning. I couldn't sleep that well. I only got about an hour and a half of sleep, and then I was like, you know what? Let me go ahead and edit some stuff, find out what's going on over here. Noticed that one of my programs it wasn't acting up properly, so I have to download the latest update, and that sucks. That just sucks because to download the latest update of the said program, I need to close out Reaper, which is the program that you're seeing on the screen right now. And I have a bunch. You can see all these tabs over here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5, and that's 6 tabs over here of unfinished business that needs to be edited out. Yeah. 6 tabs. Woo. One of them is for a collab. One of them is for a collab that I recorded, but the problem was that the pacing on it was not good. The way that I edited out, the pacing was just dreadful. It was nothing but pure gas. Just imagine hearing a story with no pauses, no breathing whatsoever. That's all that you were gonna hear on the edited version. And I did not like them. I told the person that I'm doing the collab with, hey, I managed to cut the time. It sadly didn't meet the criteria of the 15 minutes that you're asking. But I do not like the pacing that is done, that is doing right now, even though I shorted out to from 25 minutes to 18 minutes. They told me, oh, tell you what, I want you to send me something that you're happy with. Make sure that you get the pacing the way that you want it, music and anything and everything else, and then send it my way. I was like, oh, cool. That's tight. And I got 7 minutes left of editing that story. Yeah. 7. Yes, about 7 minutes left or so. Cool. Somebody. One message deleted by a moderator. White spot ban. Ragged knockdown. Recent. Spam bot. Oh, goodness. Spammers on my Twitch channel. I mean, for spacing it, you should be able to do fine with commas and periods, but excuse me, for narrating, I got a thing over here. Give me a second. Oh, gotta find them. Where are my sticky notes? No. Okay. For narrating, whenever you do editing, as humans, we do not keep track of time. And what you think that might be proper pacing, it might not be proper pacing, sadly. Especially when it comes to a story or a narration. And that's the part that sucks. For example, if you go to another, if you're narrating a story and the sub, the theme changes, like you're talking, for example, you're talking ketchup, 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 and then suddenly you talk about a piranha down the street or something like that. Just keep in mind to give it a 2 seconds, about 2 seconds, because you're changing subjects on that. 1 second if you are talking between, if you're talking about the same subject, and half a second if you're, yeah, about half a second to a second for pauses, 1 second to a second and a half for a period. Yeah, that's what I meant, dialogue. Yeah, you could write a story with multiple points of view. It's being done. Just keep in mind that if you do that, just say whose point of view you're talking about. Because all that, I as a narrator, if you're talking about a different point of view, like for example, Timmy starts off talking and saying, and Timmy's the narrator. He's talking yada 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 yada, and then suddenly you change to the point of view of Sarah, which you want to make her talk or be the narrator on that part, put a note in there saying Sarah's point of view was different from what Timmy was saying. Timmy said that the rock is in front of, is to his right, but from Sarah's point of view, the rock was to Timmy's left side. Something like that. Or else I'll be confused as hell. I'll be using the same voice the entire time in case you want to have a different voice for the narrator. Awesome. I look forward to it. And now let me go ahead and call the stream off for real. Once again, Shashel, thank you for stopping by. You're one of the ones that keep showing up, and I like that. Thanks. Take care, and I'll be seeing you around next time on the next live stream that I do. Apparently, that's becoming a thing. I do more live stream than putting out actual finished stories. And because I've been doing that, I lost 2 subscribers. No. Oh well. Lose 2, might as well gain 4. Deuces. Bye.